It's tough considering what he means to professional wrestling. But like also too, this is the toughest thing, the coming to terms with this whole story, because we, in the documentary, we kind of save it towards the end. So it's a little bit of a spoiler. So if you haven't seen the documentary, but we talked to his daughter. Because there is this whole story. Like this thing came out after the CNN thing, so we had to do a documentary about a guy that said these awful things, and this is his reputation, and this is now his legacy. And we ended up talking to his daughter. I think she reached out once we said we put the Kickstarter out there, and it got pushed around. And she reached out and she wanted to be a part of it, but it was kind of touch and go when we set up for her interview, and we weren't 100% sure she was even going to show up. And we left it very open to her, and we knew we were going to talk about some very personal issues. So, a side note, as a technical person, you might appreciate that I was nervous as hell putting the lavalier microphone on her and hoping I was hooking up right so we're going to get some audio, because I know
we're not going to do this again.
We're not doing this again. This is going to be a one take, and somebody's going to say something that they've never said before, and they're going to say it in public, and it's going to be on record for life. And her talking about her emotions, how much she loved her dad as a child, and then her dad leaves, and then she misses her dad, and then she gets old enough to realize all the things that her mother probably told her about how her dad really was, and then her becoming a parent herself, and then thinking like, how could anybody just leave a child? And that makes her dig in even more. But then at the same time too, it makes her wish she was closer to her father. There's all those complex emotions, and the fact that she was big enough to go over and see her father and just reach out for somebody who may or may not be there or worth reaching for. And I keep going back to it. Just think about the story of his daughter sitting in the living room with her dad, and because he's in a wheelchair, she had to pull up a kitchen chair next to him, and she just kind of put her head on his shoulder, and they just started crying because
I think he went, "I'm sorry."
Yeah, and just that we live in a time when people make mistakes, we jump on them, we ostracize them, and it's good. It's good that wrong people are being brought to light, and I feel that when people make a mistake, they should pay for it. Whatever you do that is wrong, the society deems that you should not act this way, you should face some sort of punishment. But once you have been dealt a punishment and you ask forgiveness, there has to be some sort of redemption. I've done so many awful things in my life, and because of those awful things, I have chose to live my life differently. And hopefully my life since that time has proven that. And in this moment where Dynamite is sitting with his daughter and he tells her, "I'm sorry," knowing what that sorry means. Like, well, decades of sorry, and when would he have ever said, "I'm sorry" for anything he's ever done? A man to just say, "I'm sorry," and mean it so much is the redemption after that. Also, too, like, I met Dot, his wife. Dot loves him so much. And I think from what I heard, if I remember correctly, he was in a wheelchair mere years after they were together. So she didn't get the best years.
Right.
And obviously his earning potential and everything else, but she still loved him. The way she defended him, the way that she protected him, the times that she was there means there's some sort of redeeming quality inside of him somewhere. And that's the thing too. His punishment is the fact that for a majority period of time, I don't know exactly when he was bound to a wheelchair. Are we talking like almost half his life is in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I found fascinating when we went over to see him. One of the things that we did the night before, when we met him, we did the signings, we gave him like a stack of DVDs that were shoot interviews of all his friends, because there's not a lot he can do, but he definitely had a DVD player. But we also, like, well, maybe you'll want to see some wrestling. And we just had the Wrestle Reunion Super Show that had Davey Richards versus Harry Smith on it. And well, maybe he'd want to see Harry wrestle. Maybe there's a chance. We handed it to him before we left that night, and we're like, "Here, take these as a gift, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow when we do the interview." When I showed up to do the interview, and I walked in, and I noticed that stack of DVDs, I noticed the shoot interviews were like still in a pristine stack,
Yeah.
but the shrink wrap had been taken off the wrestling show. And he was talking about the Davey Richards match and the Harry match. He goes, "Oh, it was a good match. It was good." It was like one of the few things that he wanted to see some wrestling. Yeah. So if you would have wheeled him to a wrestling ring, he would watch it and tell people what they did right or wrong. Right. But the thing is, he didn't get that. He was confined to a small apartment. It's not a slum, but it was meager accommodations. And he was wheelchair bound. He was in a completely different country from his family. I'm not 100% sure if he even saw his granddaughter. I think there's a considerable amount of punishment that he's served. And he is sorry, but Dynamite wasn't my father. Dynamite wasn't my husband. But that was something that was in the back of my mind, that I'm making a documentary about somebody's legacy, and this person has children and family. And also, too, I wanted Dynamite to like it as well. That was like one of my biggest fears, was how the family was going to react to it. And when I received a message from Dot telling me that like Dynamite actually like teared up towards the end of it, like it was, I mean, it's probably the most emotional, moving thing I've ever done. It means a lot to me. And his reaction and Dot's reaction to it, and then even Dynamite's daughter, I remember she reached out on Twitter to me and thanked me for making the documentary. Because like I said, that CNN piece was his legacy. And that's what I knew that I was up against. And you know, I understand you if you would rather see that CNN piece as that being his legacy forever. I completely understand you, and I agree. But I hope that you would see the documentary and then you would think differently of the man, and maybe think about the idea of redemption, the idea of forgiveness. And it's a complicated, it's a dark road, but at the end of it, there's some light, and that was the story that I hope to tell. But I did save this one story, that if I want the last thing that we talk about in this whole thing, I would like it to be this. And this is going to take a little bit of a visual cue from you guys. You can take an Instagram picture of this, or we can post this on our Facebook. But we're in the Manning cave, and in this office, if you guys look just up there, like at the top, there's 2 pictures of Dynamite Kid, and they're autograph pictures. If you guys look closely at the signatures, they look like shit. And that was one of the things that was also disheartening about the whole trip, because we had to get a bunch of pieces signed. You know, we had all these 8x10s that we wanted to sign, and that was part of the deal. There was a lot of them. And I remember signing them, we were trying to pass them through as fast as possible, but he's obviously having issues with his hands. And obviously there were a lot of the autographs that look like that. And those were just 2 particular 8x10s that we decided were too bad to sell, because his hands were not as functional as they used to be. And, you know, signing autographs for a considerable amount of time was tough on a man that had limited control of his hands. So I kept them. Now, one of our deals with Dynamite, when we did the documentary, is that he had to autograph an X amount of DVD covers. And so obviously there was a concern that the DVD cover signatures were going to look as awful as those do. Well, when Anthony, who was in charge of getting the signatures for the DVD covers, showed up, once the covers were done, the documentary was out, they would be released, and we, you know, sent these covers over to Anthony and told him to go get these signed as quickly as possible and mail them to us. Well, when Anthony showed up to Tom's home, there were these stacks of paper stacked up all over his kitchen table. And Anthony was like, Tom, I'm busy, we were doing some reading. And then Anthony got closer and saw that these stacks of paper, Tom had practiced his signature every single day from the day that we did the signing with him. He was embarrassed about his autograph, and he had such pride in himself that he worked on it every single day, knowing that he had to sign all these DVD covers, so that way his autograph would look perfect when he signed these DVD covers. Like, he had that much pride in himself. The man couldn't walk. He couldn't do anything else. The only thing he could do was sit at a table and practice his autograph every single day until he had an opportunity to prove that he was better than the last time that he did this. That, to me, is a story I think about Dynamite. He couldn't do anything else other than just work on this every single day, because he had pride in the people that cared about him. And I don't know.